On the 8th of December, Bashar al-Assad was finally ousted from power. The shockwaves were immediately felt in Europe, where thousands of Syrians had fled. For many of them, it was wonderful news, but also brought with it new fears.
Ich fühle mich schon wie zu Hause, weil ich einfach meine Wohnung habe, meine Freunde, meine Community.
So what should Syrians living in Europe do? Should they go back to a country whose future is uncertain and where the political situation could still descend into chaos? Or stay in Europe, where several governments are already trying to push them out the door? What future for Syrian refugees in Europe? To answer this question, we'll explain what's going on in Syria right now and its new political situation. We'll look at what official status Syrians can have living in Europe, and we'll speak to Birgit Glorious, a researcher at Germany's Chemnitz University, who's a specialist in migration. But first of all, let's hear from one of the people directly affected by this. Afra Najim is a Syrian who has been living in Austria for 4 years. And Austria is one of the countries that has already announced that it will repatriate or deport Syrians. So what does that mean for her? In 2015, she left Syria with her family. Now she lives in Vienna, Austria, where she's been studying law for 4 years. The Austrian government's decision to put in place a deportation plan for Syrians could turn her life upside down.
Mein Aufenthaltstitel ist jetzt bis Juni 2025 begrenzt. Ich müsste dann den Antrag im März stellen und da schwingt schon Unsicherheit mit, was passiert, bekomme ich eine Ablehnung. Ich weiß es nicht.
For Afra, who comes from Al-Sukhna in central Syria, the Austrian government's decision is too quick.
Unser Dorf ist einfach ein Ghost Town. Da ist niemand, da gibt es keine Infrastrukturen. Das Krankenhaus ist kaputt, es gibt keine Supermärkte. Also ist keine Grundversorgung und das betrifft viele kleine Städte in Syrien.
Afra has founded the Suryat Association with a few friends, which helps new arrivals from Syria settle into the country. According to figures from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 6 million Syrians have fled the country since 2011 and the start of the civil war. Half of them sought asylum in Turkey, while just over 1 million settled in a European country. These numbers are going to change rapidly as the weeks unfold. The UN estimates that by June next year, 1 million Syrians could have returned to Syria. But what kind of country will they find when they get there? He's the new power player in Damascus, the man who ended 54 years of dictatorship in just a few days. He goes by the nom de guerre Abu Mohammed al-Julani, and although he's now loved by Syrians, he's also a source of concern. He's the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a jihadist group once linked to al-Qaeda and blacklisted as a terrorist organization by both the UN and the European Union. It's a huge task ahead for Syria's new leaders. They need to restore stability to a shattered country, as well as winning over the world's trust. Syria has been ravaged by years of war under the iron rule of Bashar al-Assad, who brutally razed entire rebel-held neighborhoods out of revenge. In these conditions, it's hard to imagine exiles returning. The country is still deeply divided between Sunnis, Shias, Christians, Kurds, and a host of other minorities. But on camera at least, al-Julani is calling for national unity.
ويجب أن يعود الناس من هاجروا ولجأوا ونزحوا. كل الناس يجب أن يعودوا لأن نضع أيدينا بأيدي بعض ونبني سوريا القادمة بإذن الله تعالى.
Europe wants to support peace-building efforts by sending envoys to open dialogue with the new leaders.
Pour les Européens, une approche pragmatique vis-à-vis de ce gouvernement veut dire, même si on n'ouvre pas tout de suite des ambassades ou établit des liens diplomatiques avec le nouveau régime, techniquement il n'y a pas un nouveau gouvernement, on essaie quand même de prendre contact pour pouvoir négocier et pour soutenir la stabilisation de la Syrie, parce que je pense que ça c'est un intérêt légitime de tous les pays européens.
Europe's main priorities are preventing a new influx of refugees coming to Europe and preparing for displaced Syrians to return. The European Commission President recently visited Turkey, the key gateway to Europe for Syrian migrants. With the far right on the rise across the continent, she has to juggle Europe's fears and Syrians' hopes.
The lack of predictability demands utmost caution. Therefore, one thing is very clear: all returns must be voluntary, safe and dignified.
So that's the EU's official position, but some European countries are not on the same page because of domestic politics or economic or even demographic factors. In Europe, the top 3 countries that welcomed Syrian refugees are Germany, which comes far ahead of the others, with around 780,000 Syrians taken in, Austria with around 98,000, and Sweden with around 88,000. For comparison, Italy has taken in a bit over 3,000, Latvia 300, and Poland 178. And those numbers are unlikely to increase anytime soon. Less than 48 hours after Bashar al-Assad was ousted, a handful of European countries announced they were pausing decisions on Syrian asylum claims, affecting more than 100,000 cases in the EU. They say it's hard to assess the safety of a country going through a regime change, but some countries didn't even wait to see the Butcher of Damascus deposed. This summer, several EU states called on the EU to re-establish relations with Syria to allow refugees to return. Austria has now gone even further, promising a €1,000 bonus to anyone who goes back to Syria voluntarily. Some far-right parties are already calling for Syrians to be sent back against their will. However, deportations are illegal as long as the country is still considered unsafe.
Was wirklich problematisch ist in dieser politischen Praxis, dass man einfach unsauber formuliert. Zum Beispiel, wenn man über dieses Thema der Rückkehr, der möglichen Rückkehr von Geflüchteten spricht. Und wenn das dann im Grunde mit plakativen Worten übertitelt wird, in Hinsicht auf Abschiebung zum Beispiel, dann benutzt man ja eigentlich eine Begrifflichkeit, die ja eigentlich das schärfste Schwert auch in der Asylgesetzgebung betrifft. Die Abschiebung ist die gewaltvolle Entfernung eines Menschen aus dem Staat, in dem er Zuflucht gesucht hat.
And you can't simply issue a blanket deportation order. Being a refugee is a recognised protected status, and there are legal hoops to jump through before you can take it away.
Also das Widerrufsverfahren, und das wäre ja praktisch die Aberkennung des Flüchtlingsstatus, ist im Grunde vergleichbar mit dem Asylverfahren. Das heißt, das ist eine individuelle Prüfung, die hier durchgeführt wird. Und das darf man sich genauso aufwendig auch vorstellen wie ein Asylverfahren. Das heißt, man muss das wirklich von Fall zu Fall durchführen. Wenn man ein individuelles Widerrufsverfahren zum Beispiel gestartet hat und abgeschlossen hat, dann geht das ja auch nur auf der Basis unseres Asylrechtes. Und diese Basis ist immer die Menschenwürde. Das heißt, ich kann keinen Menschen zurückschieben in eine Situation, in dem ihm unmenschliche Lebensbedingungen drohen oder Folter, Verfolgung oder Gewalt.
As we saw, in the EU, Germany took in the largest number of Syrians. In 2015, Europe faced an unprecedented wave of migration, with thousands of Syrians fleeing their homes and coming to Europe through the Balkans. That's when Angela Merkel said something that came to encapsulate Germany's response to the refugee crisis. Wir schaffen das. We can do this. Strictly speaking, it more accurately translates as we can manage this, which is a bit less punchy. But Germany's open arms policy has changed since, particularly now that the country is facing snap elections in February, where the favourite political party to win, the CDU, is led by a man who wants to send Syrians back to Syria. Let's focus on the situation in Germany. Germany is home to Europe's largest Syrian population, with almost 1 million Syrians living there. 2/3 of them are refugees or under subsidiary protection. Refugee status is given to people who have left their countries due to being directly at risk of persecution because of their race, religion, political opinion, or membership of a particular social group. This also includes women's rights and those of LGBTQ+ people. Subsidiary protection is given to people who aren't directly at risk of persecution in their home country, but are under threat for other reasons, such as armed conflict. As a result, Germany's Interior Ministry now counts more Syrians living in Germany under subsidiary protection than with refugee status. But these statuses aren't for life. First, Germany gives applicants a 3-year residence permit to allow them to work. Then, to qualify for permanent residency, they have to show that they can speak German, have somewhere to live, and earn enough to be able to live in Germany. Merkel's policy worked. 10 years down the line, thousands of Syrians have made Germany their home. More than 160,000 have even got German nationality. They're the only ones who can travel to Syria and, crucially, come back again. Syrians with a different official status aren't allowed to, but that should change, according to Birgit Glorious.
Wir forschen ja sehr viel zu dem Lebensvollzug von Migrantinnen und Migranten und sehen da ja eigentlich auch immer wieder, dass diese Vorstellung von einer einmaligen Auswanderung und einem permanenten Verbleib in einem Zielland eher die Ausnahme ist. Die Regel ist, dass man mehr die Ausformung von transnationalen Lebensstilen sieht, dass also Menschen über Generationen hinweg enge Verbindungen zu ihrem Herkunftsland haben. Und diese Perspektive, denke ich, sollte man jetzt auch mal auf Syrien anwenden und sollte daran auch arbeiten, zu überlegen, welche Perspektiven könnten Syrerinnen und Syrer in Deutschland haben, für ihr Land etwas zu tun, auch wenn sie nicht zurückgehen. Wenn sie vielleicht nur temporär zurückgehen, wenn vielleicht nur ein Familienangehöriger zurückgeht, wenn man vielleicht von Deutschland aus zum Beispiel den Aufbau von zivilgesellschaftlichen Strukturen in Syrien unterstützt, mit Geld, mit Know-how.
It's an unsettling time for Syrians in Europe, many of whom are torn between joy at their country finally being free from the horrors of the Assad regime and fear about what that might mean for them and their lives here. We'll be taking a break over the end-of-year holidays, have a restful end to 2024, and the ARTE Europe Weekly team will be back in January with more news from around Europe.